So, today, we're going to dive into the story of a city whose buildings tell a deeply human tale. And it's probably not a city you'd guess. We're talking about Espoo, Finland, a place that might just change how you think about what makes a city's architecture truly great.
All right, let's start with a question for you. When I say great architectural city, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
For most of us, right, it's probably the Eiffel Tower in Paris or the Colosseum in Rome. Cities that are defined by these huge, grand statements and centuries of monumental history. But that's only one way to tell a story with buildings.
What if a city's real greatness isn't in its famous landmarks, but in how it adapts and changes over time? That's where a place like Espoo comes in. Its architecture tells a completely different kind of story, one about practicality, a deep connection to nature, and this constant evolution that's all designed around people. See, the first thing you have to get about Espoo is that it didn't grow up like most cities. There was no single, historic downtown. For most of its life, it was just a loose collection of rural villages, big forests, and scattered farms. And that decentralized beginning, that's the absolute key to understanding its entire architectural identity.
So let's go way back to the beginning. For hundreds of years in Espoo, building something wasn't about art or making a big statement. Nope, it was about one thing, and one thing only: survival.
Just think about how practical this was. Every single detail had a purpose. The material? Wood. Of course, forests were literally everywhere. The design? Low to the ground to keep the heat in, with really steep roofs so the heavy snow would just slide right off. And you know that famous Scandinavian red paint? That wasn't just for looks. It was a simple, cheap paint they could make from the local, iron-rich dirt. This was architecture as a tool, plain and simple.
Then, in the 15th century, something totally different appears on the landscape: the Espoo Cathedral. And the contrast here is just staggering. It wasn't built from wood for one family's survival. It was built from massive gray stone as a symbol for the entire community's faith. The scale just explodes, right? It goes from human to divine. This was a clear signal that Espoo was starting to connect to a much larger European world.
Later on, as Swedish and Russian influence grew, another layer gets added: the manor houses. And you can see the shift in purpose immediately. Unlike those practical farmhouses, these buildings were all about showing off status and control. They copied these grand symmetrical designs from European classicism, creating a very clear visual line between the powerful landowners and everybody else. Suddenly, architecture is speaking a whole new language, the language of power.
But the biggest, most dramatic transformation in Espoo's entire history, the moment it really started to become the city we know today, happened right after World War II. This was a complete and total reimagining. I mean, you can't overstate this. The pressure was just immense. Finland desperately needed new housing, and its capital, Helsinki, was completely full. So Espoo, this quiet, rural neighbor, was suddenly given this massive job: become a modern city for thousands and thousands of people and do it fast. So, how do you even begin to solve a problem like that?
Well, the answer was a philosophy called modernism, and it was perfect for the moment. It was all about function, simplicity, and efficiency. It embraced new materials like concrete, glass, and steel. The main idea was to strip away all the unnecessary decoration. Form follows function, as they say, and the function here was to build a whole new society.
And out of this philosophy comes one of Finland's most famous architectural achievements, a district called Tapiola. And believe me, this was not just another suburb. Oh no, this was a radical, world-changing experiment in how to live.
The whole garden city idea was just revolutionary. Instead of bulldozing the forest to build, the architects literally wove the buildings into the existing landscape. They designed everything: apartments, schools, shopping centers, to be easily reachable on foot. The goal wasn't just to stick people in boxes. It was to create a real community with an incredibly high quality of life, a community that was deeply, deeply connected to nature. Tapiola became famous all over the world for this human-first approach.
But of course, Espoo's story of adaptation didn't stop in the 1950s. The next chapters were written by technology, global business, and more recently, a growing awareness of our changing climate.
This timeline really shows you how fast things kept changing. In the 60s, you get the bold, red brick, geometric buildings of the university campus, all designed to spark innovation. Then, fast forward to the 80s, and bam, sleek glass and steel headquarters start popping up, reflecting this new global corporate identity. And today, the focus has shifted once again, this time towards sustainability and green design.
And this brings us to this really beautiful, full-circle moment in the story. Wood is back as a major building material. But just look at the difference. It's not about rough, hand-cut logs to survive a brutal winter anymore. Now it's about highly engineered timber used to create these amazing, energy-efficient, sustainable buildings. The material is the same, but the purpose has totally evolved from surviving in nature to living with nature.
So, when you put all of these layers together, the humble farmhouses, the stone church, the fancy manors, the garden city, the tech campuses, what do you actually get? What is the true identity of Espoo's architecture?
I think this quote from our source material just nails it. Espoo's architecture is not loud. It is quiet, thoughtful, and human. It doesn't shout at you. It's not trying to build the biggest, flashiest thing. It's just thoughtful. It's built on a human scale.
So in the end, Espoo's greatness isn't found in a single monument. It's found in this ongoing story of constant adaptation. It's in its deep, genuine respect for nature, where you'll find modern apartment buildings nestled among ancient trees. It's in the way that old traditions and brand new innovations can exist side by side. But more than anything, it's a city designed around the real, messy, beautiful patterns of everyday life.
And that leaves us with one last big thought. We started this by asking, what makes a city's architecture great? Well, after exploring Espoo's story, maybe the better question is this. What if the best cities aren't the ones built to be seen, but the ones that are truly built to be lived in?